Hello everyone, and welcome to Classic Gaming Today, where we take a look at the gaming experiences of the past through the eyes of the present. I am your host, Tony, and today we're going to continue looking at Action 52 as we tackle games 14 through 26. There are 52 total games in this collection that was published and developed by Active Enterprises for the NES back in 1991. After this episode, we will have been halfway through. We will get halfway through all of the games included in that collection by the end of this episode. Shoot me now. Anyway, as always, I am excited, I think, to be here. Maybe not. I hope all of you are. I hope all of you are way more excited than I am. But if you'd like to reach out, let me know how I'm doing, provide feedback, comments, suggestions, or just talk about classic games and technology in general. I would love to hear from you, and there are a few ways you can reach out. I have an X account with the handle @ClassicGamingT. I have an email address, which is classicgamingtoday@gmail.com, and we have our Discord server. The link is in the show notes. Discord is the best way to get in touch with me and the rest of the community around this podcast. There's a ton of fun out on Discord to be had, including a bunch of insane people who really want me to continue talking about Action 52 on a perpetual basis. But I do highly encourage you to visit that. Like I said, the link is in the show notes. If you can't tell, this episode is going to feel different. My mindset, usually I'm so polished with these intros and it's always the same thing. You're seeing the slow degradation of my sanity the more that I play Action 52. I hope you're all happy. Anyway, I'd also like to encourage you to check out our Patreon, which is patreon.com/classicgamingtoday. If you want even more Classic Gaming Today goodness, depending on what you define that as, including a Patreon exclusive bi-weekly podcast expansion pack, patreon.com/classicgamingtoday is where it's at. I'd also like to give a shout out to our Pantheon patrons. They are ISO, Rich Senewal, David Morton, Sam Twardowski, Sean Oliver, and Maximus Marshall. Steve Novoselic, Wendell Jr., Chris Snowden, The Bay 101, Toucan Sam, Christopher Fose, Grayor, Snatch Bandicoot, NYC Lewis W., Martin Steiner, James Nunn, Vince Gameplays, Hammond Egger, Mike Mitchell, and Marek. Thanks to our patrons for supporting the show, and thank you all for supporting the show. Whether you contribute monetarily or simply listen on a regular basis, I truly do appreciate all of the support. Before we continue diving deep into Action 52, I figured it'd be a good idea to let everybody know why we're continuing to talk about Action 52 for today's episode, and will be continuing to talk about Action 52 for the next couple of episodes. The simple fact is, it's because of all of you. That is right. At the end of last week's episode, I put it out there. I said, hey, we've gotten through 13 out of the 52 experiences included within Action 52, and I gave all of you the power to be able to dictate what the future of CGT, what the future of Classic Gaming Today was going to be. I said we could either continue talking about Action 52 because there were 39 other experiences we had not covered, or we could decide to do something different. We could pivot. We could go in a different direction and talk about something else. I put the poll out on Discord. I said, send me your emails, send me your comments, send me what you want me to do. And around, if I include all the numbers between Discord and emails and comments and everything else, 95% of you said we must continue with Action 52, which means there are only 5% of this community that is what I would consider sane. So we are going to continue talking about Action 52 today. We're going to start with game number 14 once we do get there. Just in case, though, somebody is listening to this episode and has not listened to our prior Action 52 episodes, this is our episode, this is number 3. This is our third episode on Action 52. The very first episode from a couple weeks ago was all about the history of Action 52, how it was made, why it was released, all of the intentions behind it and what it was supposed to be. That was from a couple weeks ago. Last week, we covered games 1 through 13. This week, we're going to cover games 14 through 26. So if you've randomly stumbled upon this podcast and you're starting from this episode, I do encourage you to go back and listen to the other Action 52 episodes before this one, because I am going to have some implied knowledge with my comments. There's going to be some implied knowledge where I might reference a game that we've already talked about. And if you haven't watched or listened, you could watch the episode. You're not going to see much. But if you haven't listened to the prior episodes, you may not fully grasp what I'm saying because I might do a comparison to, say, Illuminator. And if you don't know what Illuminator is, the comparison is going to fall flat. These Action 52 episodes are meant to be listened to together. They are going to effectively become the definitive compendium of Action 52 knowledge in the entire universe. And I don't know what that says about me, but that is what this is going to be. So if you are listening to this episode and you haven't listened to the prior 2 episodes, I do encourage you to go back and listen to those just because it provides some additional context for what we're going to be talking through today and ultimately for the next couple weeks because there are 52 games. And as I have always said, I do not want to just take a surface look at anything I experience. If you look at Action 52, you look at YouTube gameplay videos, you look at reviews that might be out there, a lot of times people will literally play the game for 2 minutes, one of the games in the collection for 2 minutes. They will form their thoughts and they will say, okay, that's it. Well, you may not have even experienced the majority of the game. Yes, it might be designed really poorly, but do you really understand how poorly something is designed if you only look at it for a couple minutes? I don't think so. You have to torture yourself. Research each of the games that are here in order to truly form that opinion. We are going to do that right now, and we're going to start with game number 14, which is Chill Out. This is another single-screen action platformer, which is similar in many ways to Illuminator, in that you have several different platforms you can navigate from, you have different ladders that you can climb to reach different sections of the screen, and you need to defeat a number of enemies in each stage before you can progress to the next one. This is designed very similarly to many other platforming experiences in Action 52, both ones we've talked about as well as ones we will be talking about. It has the same wonky controls with not accepting multiple button inputs at the same time. You have the same fall mechanics where if you slip and fall just a few inches, you'll die even if you don't collide with something in the environment. You have the ability to defeat enemies by throwing projectiles at them. This is a very traditional Action 52 platforming experience. The difference here, though, is that this game is actually a bit more user-friendly than Illuminator, in that your goal is to throw a bunch of snowballs at enemies to defeat them, while you avoid their own snowballs being thrown at you. This is a much faster-paced experience than Illuminator. Back in Illuminator, all you would do is fire a single projectile of light, and until that projectile either collided with an enemy or passed off the screen, you couldn't do anything else. You could move around, but it wasn't like you had any sort of rapid-fire ability. If you fired off that light beam and it missed, or you fired off the light beam and an enemy appeared behind you, you had to avoid it by moving away from it. You couldn't turn around and pepper it with its own little light beams. Here, though, in Chill Out, this is much faster paced. You have the equivalent of a machine gun arm tossing snowballs as quickly as you can, which is an interesting concept. It does increase the overall, I'll say, action portion of the platforming experience, and it does make the game a fair amount easier than what you might have seen with Illuminator. Also less challenging is the damage mechanic here, because back in Illuminator and back in a lot of other action platformers we'll be talking about, it's a single hit kill, meaning you come into contact with an enemy and you die. And that was one of my big critiques about Illuminator, by the way, was the fact that because the lights were out, you wouldn't know if an enemy spawned directly on top of a ladder, and you might have to navigate up that ladder in order to progress through the level. And you might ultimately be stuck, because if that enemy is up at the top of the ladder and you couldn't see them, and even if you could see them, you might have had your progress blocked. You'd have to walk into the enemy, you would die, and you'd have to restart that level. In Chill Out, you actually have a life bar, so you can actually take damage from enemies, and that also includes colliding with enemies. So, if an enemy is blocking your progress to a different platform, here it's okay, because you can just walk up that ladder, you collide with the enemy, and the enemy will die. Now, you can take a few hits. You can't really take a ton of hits, but you can take some damage. And I've got to believe that Chill Out is the designer's way of saying, look, I recognize that the mechanics in Illuminator were maybe a little bit too harsh, so I'm going to throw you a bone and allow you to actually survive an otherwise unwinnable situation. I'm going to assume that was the case. I'm probably giving way too much credit to the game's designers, but let's give them the benefit of the doubt in this case. That being said, even with all of the what I would consider amenities included with Chill Out in comparison to Illuminator, this is just a simpler experience without any really unique mechanics. One of the reasons I liked Illuminator, even though it was designed really poorly, was because it had an interesting concept with the level going dark unless you continue to attack enemies. There's nothing like that here. I mean, come on. Couldn't there have been some sort of freeze move or something included with a game called Chill Out? It would be right in the title and aligned with the theming of the game. You throw snowballs here. There could have been something you could do. You could have frozen an enemy. Maybe you had to move an enemy as a frozen block to reach some higher platforming areas. But no, nothing was included here. This is just a simple little action platformer. Assuming that you have gotten used to the platforming controls in Action 52, this is actually not all that horrible to play through. That being said, I mean, it is still really, really poorly designed. But if you've gotten used to the action platforming experience here and the way the controls work, it's really not bad. It's just really super simple. And once you make your way through the game's 5 levels, which as usual repeats back at stage 1 once complete, you'll have seen everything there is to see here. The fact of the matter is, Chill Out is simply too simple to be worthwhile. Our next game on the list is simply entitled Sharks, which is a single-screen action experience. You play as a diver with, I'm assuming, a harpoon gun, and you're dropped into an underwater environment where sharks and other sea creatures constantly spawn on the side of the screen and immediately rush towards you. You have to either avoid them or shoot them before they get to you. There are 5 levels included in this game, and if you complete all of them, you actually get a game over rather than the levels repeating themselves, which means this is a game that actually does have an ending condition. The other thing it means is that the game's designers were being merciful because this is an awful, awful, awful experience. There are so many issues with this game. We've got to talk about every one of them because it made me pull my hair out, figuratively and a little bit literally. First of all, the collision detection here just sometimes will not work at all. Let me go over how this works. So you're this diver, and it's a single screen experience, and you can move all around the playfield. You can move up, down, left, right, whatever. And the animals, the sea creatures that spawn, will just rush towards you. Now, as you're trying to play the game, you can kind of think about what would be the best position for your diver in order to avoid enemies attacking you. And as you play the game, when you first start, the answer to that question is right in the middle of the screen, because if something spawns to the left, you have enough time to respond to that spawn. Same thing, if the enemy spawns to the right, you have enough time to respond to that spawn. That concept goes out the window in the later stages because the enemies move so darn quickly that you cannot respond, which means you have to effectively stay on one side of the screen, which means you open yourself up to a spawn literally happening on top of you, which will kill you. That may not be the worst thing included in the game, because technically you can work through that from a skill perspective a little bit. But the collision detection here simply doesn't work sometimes. I have fired harpoons that have literally passed right through the sharks that are coming at me. It seems that if I hit their dorsal fin just right, I can defeat them. But sometimes, no. Sometimes it just doesn't work. When you play the game too, the enemies will spawn so slowly. This is a slog of an experience. You will be sitting there floating in your little diver suit for minutes. Well, at least it feels like minutes in between enemy spawns. It's probably not really minutes, it's probably seconds, but it feels so darn tedious. This game, I could have watched paint dry quicker than some of the enemy spawns in this game. But that's nothing. I could take it. I could take this experience if collision detection was bad and the speed of enemy spawns was slow. I would be okay with that. That would actually put this as one of the not so bad Action 52 experiences. But we have to talk about level 3. Level 3 is where this game goes entirely off the rails. You know how I mentioned sharks up to this point? And sharks are the prominent creatures included in this game. But level 3 introduces a brand new creature, the jellyfish. In somebody's mind, somewhere out there, they thought that having jellyfish be included in this game would be a good idea because, generally speaking, enemy diversity equals good. Except in this case, because the jellyfish are the spawn of Satan himself. They move so erratically and so randomly. A lot of times they will spawn on the side of the screen and simply dart right off the screen, which makes it impossible for you to hit them. Not to mention the wonky collision detection in general, which I mentioned about the sharks. The jellyfish, the collision detection is just god-awful. The jellyfish move all around the screen randomly. They will sometimes collide with you because, of course, they're moving randomly. You cannot avoid them if they decide they're going to make a beeline for you. You can't hit them because the collision detection is so bad, and most of the time when they spawn, they just go off the screen without even trying to attack you. What that means, because in each of the stages of the game, just like many of the other action platformers here, you have to defeat a certain number of enemies before you can move on to the next stage. And for the first 2 stages with just the sharks spawning, that can take some time to get past the first couple stages, but ultimately isn't too bad. Stage 3, the 3rd level with the jellyfish, you will spend upwards of 20 plus minutes just waiting for enemies to spawn on the screen in a killable position and not just simply move off the screen to a point where you can't actually hit them. This is so poorly designed. It is the kind of situation where if it were play tested, I can't imagine anybody would have said, good job, because this is broken. This is effectively broken. And of course, if you collide with a single enemy, because guess what? Enemy collision with your character, that works just fine. It's the projectile collision detection that doesn't work, where sometimes enemies decide they're just not going to take damage. But if they collide with you, they will kill you outright, which means the level that you're on will reset itself. Which, if you're on the jellyfish level, and let's just say hypothetically, let's say you had to kill 20 jellyfish in that level before you can move on to stage 4. Well, let's say you killed 18 of them over the course of, say, 25 minutes, because yes, that is the kind of time commitment I'm talking about with this single level of the game. And it's not action-packed. It is not something that's going to be engaging. This is really not going to be fun for you. It wasn't fun for me. But let's say you got to around 18 jellyfish kills, and you're thinking to yourself, 2 more kills and I get to the next stage and I can finally put this one behind me. And then a jellyfish spawns on you, or it spawns right near you and it just darts right to you, or it moves in a zigzag pattern and then hits you. Well, you just have to restart that entire stage again. And that, my friends, feels awful. So bad. If you get past level 3, there are 2 more levels to progress through. Luckily, jellyfish do not show up anywhere else in the game because it's just absolutely insane that this was even a thing to begin with. The thing, though, with the latter stages, stage 4 and stage 5, is that now the sharks move so fast that they actually move faster than your harpoon gun can shoot, meaning if the shark spawned and was moving away from you and you shot your harpoon gun, the shark would be accelerating away from your harpoon gun. Which means that unless you get really lucky or you attack a shark head on, which is really dangerous because sometimes the harpoons will pass right through them. Unless you attack the sharks head on, many of the sharks are just going to swim away from you and you have no way of killing them at all. That makes the later stages deadly, and it also makes them very tedious to get through. I've got to say, Sharks is one of my least favorite games that we've played so far, and that is definitely saying something. It is just so tedious. And the thing is, this could have been a fun, albeit simple little game. It's just that the design failed that assignment in every respect. This one is not fun. It is not worth your time. I would steer clear of this one entirely. It is just a bad game. Moving on to our next game, we have Megalonia, which is a side-scrolling space shooter. This one features 5 different levels of somewhat increasing difficulty, though honestly, most of the difficulty you'll face is going to come from the idiotic game design as opposed to anything intrinsic within the game itself. The overall structure of the game is, like I said, 5 levels. If you beat all 5 levels, you get to restart at stage 1 again, because that's just the way Action 52 rolls. And the way this works is similar to many other side-scrolling space shooting kinds of experiences. You're going to move from left to right. The screen is going to scroll with you. There's going to be enemies that spawn as you move forward. You're going to try to shoot those enemies if you can. Otherwise, you avoid them, because there's really no negative to avoiding them, except for the fact that it will make the boss fight harder, which I'll talk about in a little bit. But you just move forward and you shoot, then you eventually get to a boss fight. The boss is the same in every single level, by the way, so no real change there. You get to the end of the level, you fight the boss, you beat the boss, you go on to the next stage. Here's the interesting thing, though, about the way Megalonia was designed, and I've got to believe this was a flaw in the design and not something that was intended. The game, Megalonia, basically has a single hidden hit bar that represents the damage that was taken for all enemies, including the boss itself. And the way it works is, if you attack an enemy within a stage, if you defeat enemies as you're flying from left to right through a stage, it will actually deplete the boss's hit points before you even reach it. So that when you get to the boss, if you've fought and let's say you've defeated maybe 7 enemies as you've been flying through a stage, by the time you get to the boss, you have to hit that boss 7 less times than you otherwise would have if you defeated no enemies. That actually makes it so that if you defeat enough enemies as you're flying through a stage, you may be able to skip the boss entirely, because I guess the boss died before you even got there and it just whisks you off to the next stage. I can't tell whether this is a genius game design decision or something that is totally boneheaded, but I'm going to lean towards the boneheaded kind of thing, because that just doesn't make any sense to me. Now, I will say that if you do end up getting to a boss, the bosses themselves are very uninspired. They are really poorly designed. Each of the bosses are a pretty large ship. They fire a bunch of projectiles at you. They move around the screen randomly. They're not really all that hard to deal with, but they're a little tricky to deal with, I will admit. One of the reasons that they're tricky is because it seems that there's only a single section of the boss's ship that you can actually hit with your missiles. Otherwise, it just passes right through them. So collision detection for the win. There is very little of that here. The other piece of the design here that I have to take exception with is the fact that within the individual stages themselves, there are background elements, as you would expect. I mean, you want something that's visually appealing. And while I would never go so far as to say that Megalonia is visually appealing, there are some different design elements at play as you play through each of the game's stages. Most of those design elements, at least in the early going, feel like background kind of elements. They don't do any damage to you. You can kind of fly through them. It looks like you might collide with some of them. Like there's one section of, I believe, stage 1 where there's some arches that are there, and it looks like almost like an architectural kind of thing, but you can pass right through them and you don't take any damage. That's awesome, because then it tells your brain that, look, there's going to be some design things here. Don't worry about it. It's just for flavor. It's just to add to the visual elements of the game. But then you reach a later stage where those same exact kind of visual elements are there. You fly forward completely unaware and you collide with a wall. And you think to yourself, what? What just happened? Why did this happen? I don't know why it just happened. Well, I'll tell you why. Because some levels have designs and background elements that are truly just background elements, while other levels have very similar designs but are actually collidable and will kill you, which means navigating in Megalonia is really just luck. I mean, once you learn the stages, you can get through them. You'll know which ones are collidable and which ones aren't. But do you really want to spend the amount of time it takes to memorize which ones are collidable and which ones aren't? I can tell you don't. I can affirm that you do not want to spend that much time with it. I did spend enough time with it to know which ones are collidable and which ones weren't as I worked through the rest of the game. And I have got to say, I wish I had that time back. This is something that is just simply incompetent. The design here is incompetent. It's not a horrible idea. And honestly, it's not the worst gameplay in that the controls move around. You can move your ship around just fine. You can shoot just fine. It's just the way that all of that is designed and how the design comes together in a single package. It makes this one a complete mess and something that I will never, ever, ever touch again. This one could have been something, but it simply isn't. Moving on to our next game, we have French Baker, which is another action platforming game similar to Illuminator and Chill Out, in that you have a single screen, multiple platforms, you have ladders to climb, you have enemies that spawn, only this time, you're a baker fighting various pieces of food and the kitchen furniture, I guess. Maybe this is like the scene from Beauty and the Beast, where it's like, be our guest, except the French baker is trying to actively kill all of the anthropomorphized items and food stuff. Anyway, there's 4 stages in French Baker, and very similar kind of situation and controls as other Action 52 platformers, and that you get from one stage to the next by killing a certain number of enemies in a given stage, and then you get whisked away to the next stage. The platforming controls here are the same kind of platforming controls that you have in any other platforming title here within Action 52, which means they are not great. If you do end up beating stage 4, though, you get sent back to the beginning to do it all over again. This is one of those games that's just there's not a ton to talk about, really. I mean, it's a very simple platformer. It's not really all that challenging. It's going to monopolize your time for maybe 5-ish minutes or so. There is some hidden complexity here, like clip detection that sometimes doesn't work, but luckily most stages do have a spot where you can hide out on a ladder and just pepper enemies without any chance of being hit, which makes this a very simple kind of experience. I honestly think you should try this one out just because it's an easy experience and will be a little bit of a palate cleanser as we move between some of the brutally unfair experiences we're going to be talking about. There are very few games within this collection that are just so simple and not challenging that it feels like a breath of fresh air when you actually play a game that isn't designed to simply kill you at every moment. Other than that, though, other than acting as a palate-cleansing kind of experience, there is nothing here to talk about. French Baker is ridiculously easy. It's maybe worth a few minutes of your time, but otherwise, I can't see anybody playing this one more than that. Moving on to the next game, we have Atmosquake, which is another vertically scrolling space shooter. There are 5 stages included in this game, sort of, and I'll explain what I mean in just a little bit. When you first start playing Atmosquake, if you're like me, you're going to start thinking, this isn't all that bad of an experience. I mean, sure, enemies can be a little bit tricky to hit, and environmental navigation can be a bit cumbersome, but it's really not awful. The first couple stages are actually surprisingly competent. I mean, they're not deep. It's not like you're going to go out and say, oh my, I need to buy Atmosquake. If it was sitting on the store shelf, oh yeah, I'll spend $50 on that game. No, nobody would ever say that. And if you would say that, you need help. But compared to a lot of the other Action 52 games here, Atmosquake actually starts out surprisingly decently. Then you get to around stage 3, and you realize that environmental collision detection is just a little bit off. You take a look at the screen, you see when your ship explodes as you're near, but not colliding with, a block that might be on the screen. And you think to yourself, that collision detection is just a little bit off. But it's something you can learn from. You can keep playing the game and you will eventually get better and you'll learn where the different traps are, so to speak, where you have to be really careful with avoiding colliding with any objects. So eventually you get good enough to get past stage 3. Then you get to stage 4 and you need to navigate environments that feel like they're building themselves in real time. I'm not kidding. When you play stage 4, it almost feels like the game is generating itself procedurally, even though I know that's not the case because stage 4 is the same exact layout anytime you play it. But just the visual elements here kind of feel like it's being created on the fly. It was kind of an interesting experience. That being said, the overall design in stage 4 is much more brutal than what you would experience in the first 3 stages of the game. There are a couple of sections here where it is very difficult to navigate your ship through. The enemies are not challenging. The enemies really aren't challenging in Atmosquake. I mean, sure, when they spawn as you're trying to navigate through a particularly tricky section of the stage, they can be a bit annoying. But at the end of the day, the enemies are just there. They're kind of flavor in Atmosquake. The real difficulty is trying to navigate the environment itself because there's going to be some sections where the space that you could fit your ship through are so narrow that you will sometimes collide with something. It doesn't look like you're going to collide with it, but because of the wonky collision detection, you will collide, you will die, you'll be reset back to the beginning of the stage. If you've lost all your lives, of course, you will be reset back to the very beginning of the game because there are no continues here, there are no checkpoints, which is pretty much par for the course with Action 52. Let's say you get past stage 4 though. If you do, you'll reach stage 5, in which an asshole has just been ripped into the fabric of space-time, and you see the true horrors lurking at the heart of the universe. In other words, the game becomes a garbled mess that will kill you randomly as soon as your ship moves. I think I may have seen God at some point, though I can't truly be sure. Anyway, Atmos Quake, from my perspective, was semi-competent until it wasn't, and by the time you reach stage 5, you will recognize that the game itself is entirely broken. Up until that point, though, yeah, you can actually get a little bit of gameplay here. It's not the worst thing in the world. It's just, man, it could have been more. If it was actually finished, and if stage 5 didn't literally decompose into a mess of pixels that will just kill you randomly, I could see getting a little bit of fun out of this one. I did have a little bit of fun, although the collision detection really was annoying. But beyond that, Atmos Quake wasn't the worst experience here. Something you should probably check out, but I wouldn't spend all that much time playing it. Our next game on the list is Meong. At least I'm assuming that's how you pronounce that name. It's Meong. And this is perhaps the most unique Action 52 game that we have played to date because it is not an action platformer. It's not a vertically scrolling shooter. It's not a horizontally scrolling shooter. It's not anything like that. This is a puzzle game. It's a tile-based puzzle game, kinda sorta similar to, say, Minesweeper, in that there's a grid that you have to navigate through, but not so much Minesweeper in that you actually have to navigate through a grid as opposed to simply identify where bombs might be. So the way this game works, and when you first start playing this game, you're going to think that the game is entirely unfair and absolutely ludicrously designed. Because when you get into the game, you'll have a grid. There's a grid in front of you. You'll be starting at the very bottom of the grid. And your goal is to make your way from one end of the grid to the other end of the grid. Now, this is not a single screen kind of experience. The grid will actually scroll. So in order to navigate that individual grid, you have to make your way across a huge playfield. And as you go, you might find different pits that you have to avoid. There might be sections where bombs might be sitting, where if you step on it, you'll explode and you'll die and you have to restart the level. And it's basically kind of navigating a minefield without knowing where the heck the mines are. And when you first start playing the game, you're going to assume this is purely a trial and error kind of experience, which honestly feels absolutely awful. When you sit down and you start trying to navigate and you randomly hit, say, I don't know, a random block, and then you have to restart, and you don't know how big the level's going to be. You don't know how far you're going to have to go. You just know that you have to make it somewhere. And it just feels like, how could this possibly be? And I will admit, when I first started playing the game, I had to map out a path through the first stage of the game, primarily through trial and error. And just to give you a little bit of sense as far as how big these levels are, I actually wrote down my directions. Now, this is just one possible set of directions for getting through that first stage of the game. And I might have trailed off near the end because I was really close to the finish line. So take this with a little bit of a grain of salt, but these were my notes as I was first playing through that first stage. So here's what you have to do in order to navigate that first stage. And remember, at this point, it's entirely blind. You don't know where anything could be hiding. Assume pure trial and error gameplay. So my directions are: up 12, left 1, up 7, right 1, up 3, left 1, up 5, right 1, up 7, left 1, up 8, right 1, up 4, left 1, up 6, right 1, up 3, left 1, up 4, right 1, up 4, left 1, up 2, right 1, up 8, left 1, up 9, right 2, up 1, left 1, up 2, right 1, up 5, left 1, up 4, left 2, up 3, or 2, right 2, up 9, left 2, up 4, right 1, up 6, left 1, up 8, right 3, up 4, left 1, up 10, left 1, up 1, left 1, up 5, right 1, up 4, right 1, up 1, right 1, up 8, and then you reach the finish line. And I thought to myself, if I have to go through every stage here, there are 4 stages. If I had to go through those 4 stages and just randomly try to find my way through the stages, and the fact that you would die if you land on something and all the stuff is hidden, I think I would have screamed. Luckily, when you get to stage 2, I think it starts on stage 2, the actual bombs and where they're located start to be signposted. You can actually see the outline of squares where bombs are hiding or where traps are hiding, which makes navigating that stage ridiculously easier than the first stage. Now, it turns out, and this is something I did not realize while I was playing the game, but after I played the game, I had to do some research on it because I thought there's no way that this design, even in a package as ridiculous as Action 52, there's no way that anybody could have thought that this design was a good design. Like, it's not possible, right? I mean, it's not possible, is it? Well, it turns out, according to something I found online, there is, in fact, a way to know where different mines or bombs might be. And apparently, if you don't continue to move vertically, if you don't continue to move through the playfield, eventually the bombs or the traps or whatever will show themselves on the screen. So basically the strategy, from what I understand, and I did not go back to play the game after I made my own way through the game because no, it's not worth it. But apparently the strategy is to just bounce back and forth between two consecutive or two adjacent tiles, and then eventually the bombs or the traps ahead of you will reveal themselves. You navigate up a bit, you get up to the next section where they may not have revealed themselves yet. You bounce back and forth between a couple of adjacent tiles, then eventually they'll reveal themselves. You move forward, so on and so on. So I suppose, now once again, I did not test this myself because I am not touching Miang again, because my own personal experience through the game, trying to get through it with trial and error, is just ridiculous. But apparently there is a much easier, more user-friendly way to do that, to get through the game. And I can if that's true, and I have no reason to believe it's not, but if that's true, then okay, I can kind of see what the developers were going for with this. I mean, the fact is, if it is true and you can literally just bounce back and forth between a couple of adjacent tiles and then see what traps and dangers are hiding in front of you, and then you could just avoid them, this makes for a very simple puzzle game. At the same time, if it was the way I played it, which was purely trial and error, and with the size of the playfield, having to go through that from a trial and error perspective with limited lives and no checkpoints or anything like that, it would be just absolutely insane to be designed that way. So I don't know what the right middle ground is. All I know is that overall, Miang is a very unique concept, at least within the context of Action 52 more broadly. But ultimately, it's just too simple, and it's too I don't know. It's just missing. It's missing something, and it's missing more somethings than some of the other games are missing those somethings, because this is a something that is just there. It's simply there to be experienced. And if you tackle it in the easy way by just bouncing back and forth and observing, then it becomes not a puzzle game at all. If you tackle it via trial and error, it's not really a puzzle game. It's just something that's a trial of your own perseverance to get through it. So this is just missing. It's a conceptually unique idea, but it's missing the thing that would make it a meaningful idea, if that makes any sense. So Miang, it's not offensive, I guess. Sort of. I don't know. I'm kind of on the fence with this one because I appreciate the fact that it's unique in comparison to the rest of the Action 52 games we've covered. It's just not all that great anyway. So I don't know that you need to spend any time with Miang. I am not going to play it again, ever. But it's there, and it's a little bit different than what we've experienced so far. So I've got to give it at least a couple points for that. Moving on to our next game, we have Space Dreams, which is a vertically scrolling space shooter. In this one, you control a pacifier or maybe a diamond ring, and you need to shoot a bunch of different flying children's toys and clothespins and safety pins and other kinds of miscellaneous household things that you just might find sitting around your house. You're in a spaceship of sort. I guess you're a spaceship. I have no freaking clue on this one, to be honest with you. But you're just shooting all this different stuff, and you're moving through the game. There's 12 stages, which is cool. I mean, that's a lot of content here. Now, maybe we'll talk about that. First of all, I've got to take a step back and talk about this. Space Dreams. So let's do a little bit of a critical analysis of this thing, because you're literally controlling. Your spaceship is either a baby. I've seen in like the FAQs for the game, somebody thinks it's a baby pacifier. it looked more like a diamond engagement ring to me, and it shoots stars. So I'm going to assume that it is actually a diamond engagement ring, and the stars that you're firing are the glistening light that shines off of a diamond if it has the good, good clarity and cut and everything. I mean, we're not going to talk about the whole cut and clarity of diamonds here, but it was a pretty chunky ring. So, I mean, I've got to believe that it could transfer some light. So you're firing these stars out there, and you're in space because of course you are. And then each of the enemy ships that you're fighting, they're not really ships, they're just kind of things. Like I think there was like a teddy bear in there. There was definitely some clothespins and safety pins and other miscellaneous stuff. Now the title is called Space Dreams. And if I think about the title, okay, space, so you are in space, that's obvious, and dreams. So my assumption is that this is actually somebody dreaming about space. And as they're dreaming about it, they don't dream about it in the traditional kind of way. Like this is not something you would never see. This is an episode of Star Trek or a Star Wars film, but you're just a normal household guy. Maybe you're a stay-at-home dad. I'll put it into like my perspective. Let's say I'm a stay-at-home dad and I'm just sitting there and I fall asleep, and I like science, so I like space. And then I'm sitting there and I start dreaming about all the stuff from my daily life, the baby stuff, the ring that I'm about to, that I bought for my wife when we got engaged or whatever. I could see how you might dream about space and then have normal household objects kind of influence or invade those dreams. So I guess this is an allegory for, wait, what the hell am I saying? Why am I talking about this in any capacity? I should not have. Okay. Somebody got way too drunk or way too high and then sat down and thought, what would be a great idea for a game? And then they put that down. That's what Space Dreams is. First of all, remember I said there's 12 stages in the game? They're all the same. They're literally all the same level. The enemies change a little bit as you go through the game, which I gotta give it credit, I guess, because the enemies do get a little bit more diverse as you play, but the background of each stage, identical. There's no palette swaps. I would have loved to see a palette swap here. Instead of like a purple background, maybe you got a green background, maybe like a blue. Ooh, you could have done things. There was none of that here. You have 12 stages of the same exact thing, effectively. You have enemies that are just household things that kind of float down at you. They might shoot at you a little bit. There's nothing really crazy here. The enemies do get a little bit harder as you go into later stages of the game. They move a little bit faster. You have a little bit of a harder time avoiding them. And at the end of each stage, or near the end of each stage, you start seeing all these kind of rips in space and time where you have to avoid those. If you don't, then you're going to collide with it, and turns out that's going to kill you. So you want to avoid those. There are some tricky elements here to avoid some of the faster moving enemies in later stages, and also avoid those rips in the fabric of space-time that you sometimes experience as you get a little bit further in the stages. So there is something there, but this whole thing is like a fever dream that I can't even imagine why anybody would ever think that this was a good idea as a space shooter. Just conceptually, have you ever thought, you know what? I want to fly through space as a ring, an engagement ring ship, because why not? And I'm not just talking about like a themed ship. Like I'm saying your actual ship object is an engagement ring. And all of the other enemy ships, they're not ships. It's just stuff floating around. You know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of, there was a CDI game. What is it? Phantom Express? It was something on the Midway. Phantom Express. Oh, geez. Why can I not remember? I own this game, by the way. And basically, you're riding a series of roller coasters, and it's like a shooting gallery kind of experience where all of these different things pop up from life and might be, and you progress through life as you play this game. Like each of the roller coasters are themed, where like the first one might be as you're a baby, so there's baby stuff in there, and then maybe the next one is when you're like an adolescent, and it kind of progresses. Eventually you get to old age, and you have to get a certain score as you move through these roller coasters, and you got to shoot the different things that appear in the environment. That game is a trip in a really bad way. This game feels like the 8-bit incarnation of that. Maybe this inspired that CDI game. Wow. I don't know. It's just bad. Look, I've talked about this one way too long for what it is. It is simply odd. It is not designed well. It's not like it's really fun to play. It's just super weird. I mean, it makes perfect sense as a part of Action 52, but it's just weird. I don't even know what to think about that one. So we're going to move on, and we're going to start talking about Streamers, which is the Temu version of Bionic Commando. That's the best way you can think of this game. The way it works is it's another platforming kind of experience, but here you can't shoot and you can't jump. The only thing you can do is fire out this kind of diagonal appendage thing. I guess it's a streamer, maybe. I mean, in Bionic Commando parlance, it would have been your bionic arm, but this is way too simple to even see what the hell it is. It's literally just a single diagonal line that shoots out from you diagonally. And if you hit the right part of a platform, it will zoom you up to that platform in a diagonal kind of motion. So you can kind of think of it as a Bionic Commando-like experience, except with none of the goodness that Bionic Commando adds. So you can't jump. Of course, you couldn't jump in Bionic Commando either, but that's because you had your little robotic arm that lets you navigate the environment, which was really cool and really unique at the time. You can't shoot. The graphics are super simple. And as you're navigating the environment, you might find different enemies walking back and forth on a given platform. Well, if that enemy collides with you, you will take some damage. Now, you can take a few hits in this game, so it's not a one-hit, one-kill kind of scenario, which is good. But trying to navigate the platforms by itself, I can't believe I'm going to say this. Navigating the platforms and using the diagonal motion and movement, it's not the worst thing in the world. I mean, remember, I'm talking about Action 52. So it's not the worst thing in Action 52. But there are some really weird design decisions too. Like as an example, as you're navigating, as you're climbing up the platforms, because the goal, there's 4 stages here, and the goal is to get to the top of each individual stage. So as you're going through it, you might find some bad guys that are walking back and forth. Okay, fine, they're bad guys. I mean, you got to avoid them. You don't want to hit them because then you take some damage. But then you might get to a certain platform and you see a bag of money. And you think to yourself, well, a bag of money. In every video game ever made, and I dare you to find a video game that goes against this trope. In every video game that has ever been made in the history of history, in every video game, you see a bag of money. What are you going to do? I'm going to give you a multiple choice. Do you A, pick it up, B, avoid it, or C, take damage from it? What do you think happens here? Well, if you said pick it up, you would be wrong, because in this game, bags of money are deadly. If you collide with a bag of money, you will take damage. This makes absolutely negative sense in the context of everything. There's also some platforms that you might find a magic wand on. And first of all, you might think to yourself, why is there a magic wand here? I guess the theming for the game is kind of like a birthday party. Maybe. I honestly don't know. At this point, I'm effectively, I'm totally lost. But as you're going through the game, you might find a magic wand on a certain platform. If you collide with that, that's also deadly. That will do damage to you. So there's a lot of stuff you got to avoid in this game. And sometimes it's unavoidable damage. Like there might be a situation where you're climbing up these platforms and the only spot you can grapple onto to pull yourself up will propel you right into one of these obstacles, like a magic wand or a bag of money or even an enemy, in which case you're going to take damage. Now, I will say that the amount of damage you can take is fairly, I guess, high. It's not high, but I mean, it's forgiving, I guess is the best way to put it. This is a fairly forgiving game from my perspective. It does not take too long to beat the 4 stages. Of course, if you do beat those 4 stages, you get to redo it all over again because there is no end to this one, just like all of the other Action 52, or at least most of the other Action 52 experiences. But, you got to play through it. You get to the top of the stage. And then, here's the cool thing. You get to the top of the stage and nothing happens. And you think to yourself, well, what happened? And nothing is happening. Well, it turns out, once you get to the top of the stage, you don't just get to the top of the stage and reach the winning condition for the level. Oh no, you have to walk off the side of the stage from the top of the stage in order to get whisked off to the next stage. I was lucky, maybe. in that every time I walked off the side of the stage, it did whisk me away to the next stage. I don't know if I got lucky in that the direction I moved, because you can move either right or left off of each of these top platforms. I don't know if I just got lucky or if you literally can move in either direction and you would get moved on to the next stage. I do not know. I did not test it. I did not care to. But the fact is that it's just weird. It's a weird design. All that being said, though, this one is kind of fun in short bursts. Now recognize, this is not a good game, but in comparison to some of the other games we've talked through, it's kind of unique. And I can, if I just tilt my head just the right way, I can kind of see this one being semi-fun for very short periods of time. I think you should check it out if you want to see something just a little bit different than some of the other platformers that were included with Action 52. Don't play it if you're trying to get a good experience. Oh, I mean, fact is, don't play Action 52 in general, is my general advice. But if you're going to play something, you could do a lot worse than streamers. We're going to move on to our next game on the list, which is Spread Fire. This is a single screen vertical shooter, very similar to Galaga, if it was designed by an incompetent jackass. There is so much wrong with this game. First of all, there are 20 levels. This is the longest game that I've experienced so far as we're talking through the games. 20 levels, longest in terms of content, I should say, not necessarily in terms of time investment, because there is some time investment required with some of the shorter games. But Spread Fire has 20 levels. Now, if you look in guides that are out there, because there are in fact guides out there for Action 52, for whatever reason. But if you look at guides, some of them will say that there's only 19 stages in the game. They are wrong, because the 20th stage is just mislabeled. You get past stage 19, you get to stage 20, and it's just labeled level 1, but it retains the same very high difficulty from stage 19. If you beat that phantom level 1, then you will return to the true level 1. So it's not like there's some hidden glitch or something that will let you actually see a game completion screen. They don't exist. But there are 20 levels in the game. Once you beat the 20th level, even though it's labeled as level 1, you get returned to the real level 1 to play it all over again. I do want to talk about the good parts of this game first, because, as with anything, there's usually a good and a bad, a positive and a negative. And you all know I like to accentuate the positive. I'm a positive person in general. So let's talk about the good stuff with this game. The controls, relatively snappy, and you can fire projectiles as quickly as your finger can tap your controller's buttons. I haven't called it out all the time, but there's a lot of games here where the projectile that you fire, you're limited to a single projectile on screen at any point in time, which means there is no rapid fire. There are some others that do allow you to rapid fire if you press the button in sequence consecutively, but a lot of games, they don't allow you to do that. In Spread Fire, you can. You can tap that button as fast as you can, and there'll be projectiles flying all over the screen. It is glorious. Absolutely glorious. That is the only good part about this game. So now let's talk about the bad. We'll talk about the bad stuff here. Everything. Literally everything else is bad. The collision detection, non-existent. You will fire your projectiles and they'll just pass through so many enemies. Sometimes they'll randomly cause an enemy to die, which is great because you want to do that. But most of the time, you're not going to. You could be firing a never-ending barrage of projectiles, and the enemies will move around the screen. They will not take damage. It's like watching Han Solo navigate an asteroid field in the Millennium Falcon with TIE fighters trying to shoot him, and he's just weaving in and out, and there's like the whole sky is filled with laser fire and nothing. It just never hits them. That's what these enemies are in Spread Fire. Now, in the early stages of the game, it's not so bad because they move kind of slow, and even though they might not have the best collision detection, you can oftentimes hit them with a well-placed shot, or you're just peppering the screen with so many projectiles that they have no choice except to wander into that projectile path. The later stages, though, the later stages in the game are ridiculous. I mean, this is one of the unnecessarily hardest experiences that you will experience within Action 52. It is entirely unnecessary. The enemies move so quickly. They move so randomly. They avoid all of your shots. Like I said, the shots just pass right through them. And Occasionally, the enemies, and more than occasionally, especially on the later stages, the enemies will zoom down to the bottom of the screen, which is where you are. It is not the kind of game where you can move all around in your playfield. You're stuck at the bottom part of the screen, so you can only move horizontally. That's why I said it's kind of like I said Galaga, but it's more fixed than that. Like Galaga, wait, can you move around? Oh my God, now I'm questioning myself. In any event, it's a screen where you can't move around. You're stuck at the bottom. You can only move left and right. But what happens is the enemies will often fly down to the bottom of the screen, and then they will move horizontally towards you. You can't avoid those enemies. And sometimes the enemies move so fast and you're at a portion of the screen where you can't get to them that there is nothing you can do except take the death. You can get hit once, by the way, before you actually die. But that's not enough. The game is horrible. Absolutely horrible. It is so unfair. It is so unfriendly to you as a player. I died so many times because of unfair mechanics. So many times that it made me go a little bit crazy. As you play the game, like I said, there's 20 levels. You have to beat 12 enemies in each stage in order to advance to the next stage. On late stages, this can be next to impossible. Like I said, your bullets, they go right through enemies. There's one type of enemy that can't even be hit. Literally cannot be hit. It is purely invincible. There's another enemy type that constantly shifts between two different models, like a Klingon bird of prey who's tripping balls and constantly shifting between cloaked and uncloaked as he merges with another parallel dimensions reality. This is an insane game. It is god-awful. It is so bad. This is one of the worst things ever. And yet, it is still not the worst Action 52 has to offer. More on that in just a little bit. Just for awareness though, I did spend hours playing this game, just because the game wouldn't actually let me hit enemies in order to progress. And my own personal requirement is that I have to beat every single one of the games in this collection. The overall ranking for this one is simply f*** you to everybody who designed this game. Anybody involved? No, just nope. I'm feeling it. We got to move on. This one hurt. This was a bad one for me. Moving past that absolute train wreck of a game, we get to Bubblegum Rosie, which is a platforming title with a twist. There are 3 stages here. Stages 1 and 3 are standard side-scrolling action platforming experiences, with the second stage being a tops-down driving experience. Now on paper, this sounds very unique amongst the broader Action 52 game catalog, because how many games have we played that actually experimented with different gameplay types within a single game? Bubblegum Rosie, to the best of my knowledge, and I'm trying to remember, I think this is the first one where a different stage has a different type of gameplay than what you might have experienced before. Most of the titles we've looked at so far, every single stage is just more of the same. Bubblegum Rosie is different, which makes it sound very unique from a conceptual perspective. The issue is the game kind of sucks. The platforming action here is totally subpar and occasionally broken. This is the same stupid situation where multiple key presses will not work at the same time, only here it's even more egregious. It feels like you're totally hampered by the lack of quality controls in the game. It makes platforming throughout any of the game's 3 stages, and really only 2 platforming stages, but it makes platforming a total chore. And on the 3rd stage itself, it makes platforming nearly impossible without abusing save states. The issue is birds. Now look, normal everyday life, I don't mind birds. Birds are kind of cool. I like looking at birds. I'm not a bird watcher. I mean, I'm not that voyeuristic, but birds are fine. We have a bird feeder outside in our backyard. And occasionally birds will go over there and it's like, oh, cool. Look, that's a robin or that's a cardinal or something. They're cool. The birds are cool, right? Except in Bubblegum Rosie, because the birds here move in very random directions. They will often swarm you. I'm talking about stage 3 in particular, which is just insane. The birds will swarm you. You'll have to try to platform with those same crappy platforming controls as you move throughout the level. The birds will swarm you. You cannot avoid them. You can only take one hit before the next one will kill you. And trying to move through the stages with birds swarming you, trying to jump off of very small platforms as other objects in the environment which are either not destructible or move around in their own random patterns, all of that mixed together makes for an experience that is just absolutely crazy to try to experience. I do want to make special mention about the second stage though. So the first stage, pretty traditional platforming. It's really not that bad. It's relatively easy. You can get through that one, no problem. The third stage is absolutely insane in terms of how it's designed. It is the kind of stage that will make you want to quit everything because it's just so unfriendly to players. It is completely unfriendly. The second stage is interesting though, because it's a tops-down driving stage. And you might think, well, this is kind of cool. It's a very different kind of experience. It's theoretically a very cool addition to the game. The only issue is that it contains horrible hit detection. I often died when I had multiple pixels of space between myself and the nearest object. You might be wondering, how would I know this? Because when you collide with something, maybe it was something that you didn't even notice and the game reset itself and it went on to the next life or whatever. Well, no, because in Bubblegum Rosie, the game will pause for a couple seconds when you quote unquote collide with something. And guess what? I looked at those screens. I took screenshots. There were no collisions. There was no collision here. If I had a dash cam on my vehicle, I would have reported Bubblegum Rosie for insurance fraud because while the game claims there was a collision, it's simply lying to you. I will say that Bubblegum Rosie had a little bit of promise, and the fact that the game wasn't simply the same for every single level was intriguing. It's just a shame that the design itself was god-awful. This was close to being something interesting, but ultimately was not. Moving on, we get to Micro Mike, which is a side-scrolling insanity inducer. And that is the best way I can describe this game, because this game, above any other game in Action 52, I'm going to say it right now, Micro Mike is the worst game ever. The worst game I have ever experienced, the worst game in Action 52, the worst experience I have had from a personal perspective in likely, how old am I now? 44 years. This is the worst thing ever. And I don't use those terms loosely. You guys know that I'm not hyperbolic about this stuff. I don't sensationalize my opinions. I just have them. I have my opinions. Micro Mike is just the worst. It is literally the worst. It's a side-scrolling shooter. Here's the way it works. You get into the game. There's 3 stages. It's mercifully short, but it's really not because it's impossible. When I say impossible, I don't mean the way people talk about a hard game, like, oh, Dark Souls is impossible or Elden Ring is impossible. I don't mean it like that. I mean that the literal definition of impossible applies here. You start the game, and immediately you will notice that the game moves at a ridiculous breakneck speed, and there are different obstacles you need to fly through. And many people will tell you that it's impossible to get your way through that stage. I'm going to tell you right now, that is the incorrect way of using the word impossible because it's truly not impossible. I did it. I spent enough hours playing this game that I could routinely and regularly make my way through stage 1. Easily, almost. I memorized the stage. I knew when I had to move. I knew how to get through it. I actually did that with every single stage in the game. I am bordering on insanity right now, but I made my way through it. I learned the stages. That's not the hard part. The hard part is not navigating through the stages. The hard part comes from the enemy placement, which is entirely random. Occasionally, you'll collide with an enemy and you'll destroy the enemy. Cool. I guess that's good. Other times, you collide with an enemy and you'll die, which is bad. You can fire your weapon, but it oftentimes doesn't matter because sometimes the collisions work, other times they don't. It's entirely random. Sometimes you'll be flying through a stage and it'll be totally clear. Other times you'll go through a choke point and there'll be 5 enemies literally standing next to each other or flying next to each other, making it impossible for you to progress. This game is a mess. And assuming you make your way through the individual stage, you'll get to the final boss of that stage. This boss is the worst designed boss in history because he is both the most boring boss to face. It's just the same exact ship every 3 levels, or every level. But the The boss is designed as a boring experience, but what makes it unique is that it will also fire bullets at you. Now, those bullets can be destroyed for what it's worth, but oftentimes those bullets will not emanate from the boss. So you might think to yourself, where are they coming from? Who the hell knows? They're just materializing into space within the environment. If they always spawned a little bit away from you, that would be fine, because you could orient your ship and shoot your missile at the bullet, destroy the bullet, and continue to try to defeat the boss. The issue is that occasionally those bullets will spawn literally next to you, either on top of you or close enough to you where you cannot shoot them. And because this game uses the same kind of collision detection as Bubblegum Rosie from the driving stage, there'll be times where the bullet is multiple pixels away from you and you can see the space, but you will explode regardless. This is an impossible game. You would have better luck at winning the lottery than you would at actually being able to run through this game without save states. And save states don't even work. I tried to abuse save states here. But a lot of the time what ends up happening is you might save state it, you might take a save state, and then the game randomly decides from this point forward there will be a bullet that spawns directly on you and you will die every single time, which means your save state was just ruined. So the only way you can get through this is by trial and error luck. And then you'll realize that there is no luck. You will not get through it. So what do? You grab a Game Genie. Literally, not literally, because I didn't actually get my Game Genie out because I am playing this via emulation, but I used the equivalent of a Game Genie. I got the special secrets or the cheats downloaded into RetroArch, and I put myself with infinite life because Micro Mike is not worth it. Look, do not play this game. Try any other Action 52 experience. Don't play Micro Mike. It is the worst thing ever. I hate with a passion Micro Mike. There is nothing about this game that is redeemable. The only thing, if I'm trying to find a silver lining, the only thing I could say is semi-fun, and I use that term really loosely. The only thing I could say that's semi-fun is actually navigating through the game's stage. If you took away the enemies and you took away the unfair deaths, and all you had to do was learn how to navigate through breakneck paced levels, I actually would have had an okay time. I didn't mind learning the levels and navigating through it and having to get the reaction time needed in order to make your way through each of those levels. That part I could actually get my head around, and I could totally see where a game that focused solely on that navigation aspect at ridiculous speeds might be challenging. It might be considered a hard game, but it's something you could learn and you could eventually get good enough at in order to get through it. When you add in all of the other stuff with Micro Mike, it just becomes a totally ridiculous experience. I hate it. This is quite possibly the worst thing that I've ever experienced. I have such intense rage and hatred inside of me that Micro Mike is, okay, I can't even speak now. I am off the deep end, as they say. Micro Mike is not good. Do not play it. Don't touch it. Don't treat it like a piece of radioactive waste and avoid it at all costs. It is the worst game I have ever experienced. And there are some really bad games that I've experienced. Micro Mike tops them all. This is the worst thing ever. Just stay away. Stay far away. Oh, okay. Moving past Micro Mike, we get to Underground. This is another single-screen platformer, at least sort of, where you need to navigate underground passages while avoiding or killing enemies to reach an exit. The issue here, or maybe not issue, I guess I'll say the design considerations that went into Underground, is that it's not exactly the same as other platforming experiences within Action 52. First of all, the action's a little bit more zoomed out. The overall levels that you progress through are a little bit bigger and a bit more complex than some of the other single-screen platformers that you might have experienced so far. There are 6 stages here. 1 hit will kill you, so you can't take any damage here. You can rapid fire, which is really nice. I do enjoy the rapid fire in the games that allow it. The interesting part is that your goal is not to eliminate a certain number of enemies. Your goal is to get from the entrance of the underground passage to the exit of the underground passage. And oftentimes that involves you going up and down a series of ladders, avoiding spikes, defeating enemies or avoiding enemies along the way, finding the best path through a given level to get from your entry point to the exit point. Conceptually, it's actually not so bad. And honestly, I could see a version of this game that I actually enjoy playing. The version that we got is really not it, because a lot of times enemies can spawn on top of you, or they may spawn all on a single platform, which gives you no way to actually win the game, because a lot of the platforms are smaller in general and the enemies move so fast that in order to actually progress, you have to kind of pop up and try to shoot a couple and then pop back down on the ladder and then pop back up and then shoot a couple and then pop back down. But at the same time, enemies may be respawning right on top of you. There might be a situation where the enemies are spaced in such a way on a platform that there is, and I mean this, there's legitimately no way to progress. So you have to take the death and just restart. This is especially egregious on the first stage because in the first stage, there is no ladder that you can climb back up to try to shoot the platforms or shoot the enemies that are on the platforms. In subsequent stages, there are ladders that you can kind of backtrack onto and you can clear out the path and hope that enemies respawn in a different location. Stage 1, there is no way around that. So stage 1 can effectively become unwinnable. Other stages, you can kind of make your way through. I mean, the game is very flawed. Sometimes the hit detection doesn't work. There's the unwinnable conditions I was talking about. Enemies, spawns are all weird. They can kill you instantly. But conceptually, I will maintain that this is not a bad game. There were even a couple of levels sprinkled in here where there were multiple paths you could take. There were different platforms that were connected with different ladders, and you can kind of path or kind of navigate your own way through the level, depending on where enemies had spawned. So it becomes a little bit of a pseudo puzzle platforming kind of experience. And I will admit that was kind of cool. I didn't mind that piece of the game or the way the game was designed from that perspective. Everything else about it was not great. And if I could redo this one, this is one similar to Illuminator. I feel like this is something where if the execution wasn't so poor, this could have been something actually fun to play. There is something here if the whole thing were redesigned. The concept itself is not without merit. It's just the rest of the game around it and the design that supports that concept is truly underbaked, and it's just not worth it given the way it's designed. But if it were redesigned, this could be a fun little exploration game, something super simple, but kind of a puzzle platforming experience, and I could get behind that. Underground, though, in Action 52 is not that game. And finally, we move on to our last game on the list for today, number 26, which is Rocket Jockey. This is a side-scrolling space shooter, another side-scrolling space shooter, because the Action 52 designers, when they hit on a design, they're going to stick with it. This one only has 2 levels, and you can literally set your ship at the top of the screen, go grab a cup of coffee, and come back, and you will have beaten the game. And by beaten, I mean it will have reset itself after those 2 levels, because there is no beating here. There's really not much to say about this game at all. There is a very obvious Dr. Strangelove influence because you're literally riding a rocket as you kind of twirl your lasso around, kind of like a rocket cowboy. I guess that's why they call it Rocket Jockey. Kind of in the name, I guess. You have to defeat other enemies that look similar to you. So you're riding a rocket around, literally just kind of strapped onto the rocket. Okay. I mean, I guess that's okay. This probably goes a little bit beyond Dr. Strangelove, but regardless, that's pretty much the only meaningful thing I can say about this one. It's totally not worth your time, even the minute and a half that it takes to beat the game. There are plenty of other things that you could do for a minute and a half that would be way more fun than playing Rocket Jockey. Anyway, that's it. That's it for today. We've reached the halfway point. Can you believe it? We've reached the halfway point of Action 52. At this point, we are so deep in it that it doesn't make sense to stop now. We've got to push on. We've got to get through the next 26 games. I do predict it's going to take us the next 2 episodes to get through the other games. There's plenty of stuff coming. I mean, that's all I can call it is just stuff. We'll see how it all plays out. I am looking forward. And I use that term very, very loosely. I am looking forward to eventually getting to Cheetah Men, which is the 52nd entry on the cartridge. That is going to be the finale, so to speak, of our Action 52 journey. But we'll get there. We'll get there eventually. We made it through 26 so far. I'm hanging on. I am hanging on by a thread. I'm hopeful that we continue. Let me know what you think, certainly, because, man, we're all in this together at this point. This is a joint venture. And if I'm going down, you're all going down with me. Oh, man, I can't believe what Action 52 makes me think about. Anyway, I hope you've all enjoyed listening to this episode way more than I've enjoyed my experience with Action 52 thus far. If you'd like to reach out, let me know how I'm doing, provide feedback, comments, suggestions, or just talk about classic games and technology in general. I would love to hear from you, and there are a few ways you can reach out. I have an X account with the handle @ClassicGamingT. I have an email address, which is classicgamingtoday@gmail.com, and we have our Discord server. The link is in the show notes. Discord is the best way to get in touch with me and the rest of the community around this podcast. We have a ton of fun on Discord. I highly encourage you all to check it out. I also highly encourage you to check out our Patreon. It's patreon.com/ClassicGamingToday. If you want even more Classic Gaming Today goodness, including a Patreon exclusive bi-weekly podcast expansion pack, patreon.com/ClassicGamingToday is where it's at. Before we sign off for the week, I do want to mention that our next episode, like I mentioned already, is going to be our next quarter of Action 52. That will be games 27 through 39. Oh, that sounds exciting to me. Oh my. It should be a good time. Hopefully. Maybe. I don't know. It doesn't really matter at this point. I'm a husk of a man now, but we're going to get through it. We will get through it together. At the same time, if you'd like to leave any feedback, comments, or you want to talk about how awesome Action 52 is, there's a few ways you can do that. I certainly look forward to any sort of reviews that you might provide. Not about trying to bolster star counts. This is not about trying to harvest a ton of 5-star ratings. If that happens, awesome. It means we're doing something right. It also probably means that you have not listened to Action 52. Oh, what is wrong with me today? This is what happens. This is what happens. I am totally discombobulated with everything. But anyway, definitely leave a review on your podcast engine of choice. I do truly appreciate any feedback that I get, both positive and negative. And just let me know. Let me know how it's going. Let me know how you're doing. How are you doing today? I'm something. I am falling apart right now with this Action 52 thing. Who knows how the rest of it's going to be? You're going to have to tune in a week to find out. Until then, remember, sometimes the games of the past are just as good, if not better, than the games of today. Goodbye, everyone.